Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Tron Ares. As the title says, of course, there will be spoilers in the second half of this video, but I'll let you guys know when we get to that. As you can see, I got my very small Tron collection. Most of this I actually got for my birthday, actually, including this t-shirt. I didn't have any Tron stuff. All I had was like this little actual Tron figure. That's like the only Tron stuff I've had, but got the 4K, got the little pop figure, the little Tron there, you can barely see him, but he goes inside the arcade, which I can't wait to put that up. But I was excited for this. I love Tron. I've enjoyed the movies ever since, the original one, whenever I saw that for the first time. But I enjoyed that movie. I always thought it was super cool. I love, Tron Legacy coming out. I was like, man, I can't wait for that. Of course, I was already a fan of Daft Punk. So like a lot of people, I was like, I can't wait for the visuals. I can't wait for the music. And I absolutely loved it. I have to say this for anyone who's not like super deep in the Tron, I have to mention Tron Uprising. It got one season. It was on Disney XD, and that was one of the greatest things they ever canceled, and I hate them for it. But Tron has always been super underrated as a whole. I feel like Tron is super underrated, and we finally got the third movie. Every 15 effing years, we get a Tron movie. Hopefully, it's a little bit shorter if we get another one, which I really hope we do. Hopefully, it'll be a lot shorter than a decade or more. Before Tron 4, whatever they end up calling it. But I enjoyed it. I feel like the odd man out when I say that because everyone else seems to hate this movie. And that's something I've noticed in general, because of course Tron's coming out. Most people is like, we're on YouTube. Let's talk about the old Tron movies because everyone's going to type in Tron. So I've been watching reviews where people are like, hey, Tron 1 and Tron 2. And the same thing keeps happening. People are like, yeah, these movies are actually kind of boring. Love them because they're, classic for the first movie, visual and music wise for the second movie. It's like, we love these films, but they're also kind of boring and stuff. And I'm like, I never felt that way. I always felt like, and maybe this is something I just realized, but I always felt like the Tron movies, they seem more like action movies than they really are because of the trailer. It's like, look at this spectacle. And, they of course are going to show like the grid, and specifically they'll always show like the battles or something like that in the movies or in the trailer specifically. But when you watch them, it's like, well, yeah, you get like one fight over there, and you might get more than one fight. At some point, you'll get like 2 or 3 action sequences, but they're not like action movies. They're more like dramas. It's kind of like, well, I was going to say Star Wars, but it's more like original Star Wars, where it's this crazy space opera, which they're even called that, but those are drama movies. They're space drama movies. And I always felt like Tron was like the computer sci-fi drama movies. They aren't really action films. Like even with the second one having multiple sequences, it's like visually. And of course, you'll watch a trailer, they'll say, look at this explosion, or look at someone crash into another light cycle, or a light trail or something. And other than that, it's like, well, yeah, they're not really action movies. I never felt that way. So they never bored me. I always thought they were entertaining movies, and I always thought it was just like, here's the story, and it's kind of just the drama of the weird situation that's happening to whichever character, whether it's, Kevin Flynn from the first movie or his son in the second. And then in this movie, the focus is actually on a program, of course, being Ares. I almost called him Tron Ares. Sadly, Tron is not in this film. Of course, you probably already knew that, but Tron is not in this movie. But I liked it, and like going through, and it was just like seeing a couple reviews. Most people were just like, yeah, the movie was crap. And I was just like, I didn't think it was crap. Once again, personal opinion. I just enjoyed it. I was like, I wasn't expecting some insane spectacle or anything like that. I got exactly what I pretty much expected going into it, which was kind of, I would say this one, oddly enough, I think this does have the most action out of the other films, because this one feels, it's more of a chase movie than it is the other two, where it's like, what the F is happening? We have to figure out what's going on. What's happening pretty much point blank. Like within like the first 30 to 40 minutes is where they're like, here's kind of the, you get like 30, 40 minutes of setup, and then it's like, here's the rest of the movie. And that's pretty much how it plays out. And it's pretty much a chase sequence over and over again that kind of just ramps up to the ending. And I enjoyed it for that. I was like, it's a simple premise. It's a simple story that goes through. And there are higher concepts that definitely could have been focused on, because of course it's, machines and humans and interacting. Of course, this is the first time, it's the first time the focus of the film is programs coming to the real world. It's not the first time it happened, because of course that was Tron Legacy, but I liked what they did with it. I enjoyed it, honestly. Like the whole way through, I was like, of course, visuals definitely great. I'm, blue is my favorite color, so I'm always going to be like, hey, I'd like to see more of like, Flynn's grid more so than what we got in this. And so, I like blue more than I like red, but I like what they did with it. I like the design of the vehicles, which are also slightly different and kind of updated in this as well, which has an interesting story component to it that I stayed as far away as I possibly could from this. So I was like, I kind of knew who was who as far as the actors and the characters, and that was it. And I was just like, okay, like just barely. So when I went into it, I was like, oh, that's why this thing looks like this. That makes sense now. So there's some things that you might not know going into it that'll kind of help explain, either the colors or like characters and stuff like that. You'll get those explanations. And for me, I was like, oh, that actually, that's pretty cool. So I was curious how everything was going to play out. And personally, like I said, I enjoyed it. I like the sort of chase element of this film compared to the other two movies. And I think it does put this much closer to the action realm compared to the last two, which I would definitely consider more drama movies with some action sequences and just great visuals. But this was definitely more of a chase film than it was anything else. And I liked it for that. Like, it was definitely intense, I felt, because once again, like, I think I'm really like the odd man out. I feel like, unfortunately, based on only the couple reviews I've seen, I hope that changes. But I'm like, everyone kind of has been saying the same thing. And I'm just like, I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty fun. So I enjoyed going through it, and I wasn't bothered by the story being simple or anything like that, because I felt like that's honestly what all the movies have been. It's like, it might be a high-end concept, but the movies themselves, I've always felt were pretty simple. And it's just like, well, yeah, the concept is this crazy thing, but in reality, it's like, here's just one person's story and like this crazy concept. Like, they never, honestly, if you want the crazy concept that I feel everyone says is missing from the movies, you should watch Tron Uprising. It only got one season, but if you want something that's like, here's what goes on in the actual computer on a day-to-day basis, you see just the computer world, that's where Tron Uprising was. And once again, they killed it after one effing season. Starred Elijah Wood, by the way, as the main character. Fantastic show. It was one of those like CG, like 3D animated shows. I'm always gonna miss that show. It was really, really good. It was really good. Like, I think if that show didn't get canceled after the first season, Tron would be a lot more popular. Like, if they gave that time, it definitely would have blew up, because that show was incredibly well written, and the action in that show was actually really good too. So it's unfortunate, but I do recommend checking it out if you can find it, because it's not on Disney Plus. It's on the internet. You can do some stuff. You can find it if you want to find it. It's out there somewhere. But unfortunately, canceled. But I think that's what a lot of people kind of want, where you just focus on programs in the computer realm. And you get that from Tron Uprising, and not so much in the films where the worlds kind of collide in one way or another. Someone either goes in or somebody's coming out. But I like what they did with this. Like I said, I feel like the odd man out, and hopefully I'm not, as it pertains to numbers, because that's the only effing way we're getting a sequel, is if, a bunch of people end up seeing this. But overall, I enjoyed it. Of course, everyone's going to tell you the same thing as far as visuals and music. Still great, definitely good. Like I said, it's more red. There's some other elements design wise where things it's definitely like the darkest of the films. Like, it's definitely more the vibe of like just the darker side of things, where they touch on some stuff more from the first movie than the second movie, where you deal with more of the human villain side. And I like that. That was something I enjoyed from the first movie, which was like really just hinted at, and it was kind of like technically the main reason for the first movie, but it was still really the programs. And in this, I think it really is like half and half, if not more so, like 75-25, where like the human element being bad is really what drives this film. And I was like, I actually enjoy that. I think that's a really cool way to do that, versus it being another evil program. So I definitely enjoyed that element. I think that was probably the biggest, oddly enough, outside of them obviously, coming out of the computers more so. I think that was the biggest change out of the three films, where it was like the bad human is like an actual huge component of the film. Like, it doesn't even really exist in the second movie. In the first movie, it was kind of the catalyst to get things going, because, one douchebag stole another guy's, video game. And so it was like, hey, I want to get my games back. And that was pretty much it. So I think that being a big focus, definitely, it's really the catalyst, like what leads this whole film to continue the way that it does. And I actually enjoyed that, where you kind of watch a human character be like, well, yeah, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to do it. And I like that. I was like, okay, we don't really get that from Tron. It's always, bad computer programs, or, Master Control from the first movie, and, Clue from the second movie. So that's just how it is. But having the human, like the actual human component, being the reason things are just constantly getting worse for everybody else, is actually enjoyable. So I really like that part of the movie. And in general, I thought the action and the visuals and the music, the action that we got in this one, which, like I said, was more than the last two films, definitely enjoyable. So I personally really recommend this film. I like all three of the Tron movies. It's been a minute since I actually watched the first one. I'm happy to have this on Blu-ray, or I should say in 4K, because technically that's different, but in 4K Blu-ray. Happy to have it, happy to have Tron Legacy, and I'm happy to have this movie. When it comes out, I'm probably, especially since these just came out in 4K, I'm probably gonna end up getting Tron Legacy, just to be like, I like the movie, I'm gonna have the whole trilogy just physically. So I'm glad we got it. Like I said, I really, really hope that we get another one, because I really enjoyed this movie. I still find it kind of crazy. Everybody's just like, yeah, it sucks, the writing was bad and it was boring and stuff, and I'm like, what? Maybe I'm just crazy. I just wasn't expecting anything like insanely over the top. I got like a chase sequence. I feel like people want something from Tron that it doesn't really do. And maybe, like I said, maybe that's me, and I'm just fine with what we get, and other people want extra things. Sadly, Tron Uprising, it's the best I got, and it was canceled. So, but I like what we got in this movie, so I enjoyed it. I recommend, going and check it out. I saw it with D-Box. I saw it with the movie. I see every movie at this point with moving seats. absolutely amazing. It even, the opening sequence was moving to just the music. Like no movie ever does that. It always moves to stuff in the film. It was moving to the actual music. That's how much they cared in this movie. And I was like, this is sweet. Like none of the other movies have ever done that, where it like shakes to the beat of the actual music. That's how implemented into, you know, pretty much the whole series as far as Tron is concerned. That's how implemented the music is, and I was super happy with that. I love the opening sequence. The music I do think is good. Like the main theme that they have, I thought was pretty well done. And I'll have to like, you know, I barely ever pay attention to the music outside of like, here's the main theme that repeats a couple of times, and I'm like, that's a good song. And other than that, I barely, you know, pay any attention to any other OSTs, you know, as you kind of go through the film. But I like what I heard from what I paid attention to, and I'll check out the other stuff for free somewhere, I'm sure. But all in all, I enjoyed the film, so I would love to know what you guys thought about it. I recommend going to see it. But at this point, full spoiler. So if you have not seen the film, go check it out, or you know, do whatever you want to do as far as finding a way to see it, and then come back to this. Because going in full spoilers, I really want to start with Dillinger as the human villain component, played by Evan Peters. I thought that was super cool. I like the fact that he was just dumb as it pertains to what he was doing. He just kept taking step by step and being worse and worse and worse, to the point that he got his mom killed, which of course, you know, he made these programs that are supposed to do what he says. Ares doesn't, Athena does. It backfired. Who could have seen that coming? You know, classic deal where it's like, who authorizes, like she starts making, you know, just summoning herself basically, and it's like, hey, you told me to do this, so this is what I got to do. It's like, oh, mom, not anymore. You're an orphan, buddy. So it is what it is. He did what he did, and he was constantly like, hey, I'm going to break into here, which led to a great sequence. I wish we got more action scenes like that, because I thought that was super cool with the staffs that have their own light trails. There's so much they could have done with that I wish they did. And they brought it back like a little bit at the end, but them making their own light trails and jumping off of their own light trails from their bow staffs to do other moves, and then like fighting other people, and then you throw somebody, like they threw one of the incom programs, and then two of the guys made an X to just launch this dude onto an X, and he just split in half when he landed on the cross. And I was like, that is sick. They need more of that. So if we get another movie, they need to do a lot more hand to hand, because once they do that, that's something I kind of thought with Legacy as well, where I was like, you have these weapons, and I'm a big hand to hand person. You have these discs that can shoot through people. They ricochet off of stuff. It's like Captain America's shield, where it's just like, it just comes back to them all the effing time, except for like one part in this whole movie, which is at the end when Ares, he threw his, and then that was about it. And he was like, oh crap, I threw it and it didn't come back to me. That was like the only time it doesn't for any character in the whole movie. And I was just like, man, you know, once again, hand to hand person. They need to focus on that in like the next Tron movie. They need to really do, you know, focus on some of the action elements, because they always do it with the vehicles. That's always the thing, because it's like, oh, you have obviously light cycles, and you turn on a trail, you split a cop car in half, or you have the flying vehicles, and then they, you know, put the trails like on both halves of the wing, and then they just shoot up and it clips the wings on a jet and stuff. It's like, that's great. I love seeing that. But you can do so much with hand-to-hand combat, and they had like the first action sequence, which is cool. Randomly had Cameron Monaghan in it for like 2.5 seconds, which is crazy. I don't know. I would assume he had more to do in that movie, and they cut all of that out, because I saw his name and I was like, oh, I love him. Like, you know, he's in Star Wars. He's, you know, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. He was Joker or whatever they actually called him back in Gotham. But I like him as an actor. Of course, he was in Shameless. I just never watched that, but I know a lot of people know him from that too. I was like, oh, I didn't even know he was in the movie. So, you know, stayed away from it as much as I could. And then he popped up. I was like, oh, there he is. And there he goes. He was in there for like 2.5 seconds. So he must have had more stuff. Maybe the action sequence was longer and they just cut it. It's a 2-hour movie. So maybe they had more talking or something, I guess. And then they were like, okay, we're just going to push that over there, and we're just going to nuke all of them. And then he's out of the movie. And it's like, that's weird, because you even put his name in the credits. Super weird. Like in the opening credits, you always get somebody's name, you know, at the end. Like everybody's name is at the end of the movie, but his name was in like the opening credit sequence, and he was there for like a minute total. Weird. So you know, there was some behind the scene with that. 100%. They cut some of his stuff for sure, because to have his name up there was like, oh, okay, you know, all right. I mean, I like him. I know who he is if I see his name, but I don't know if he's that famous. You know, it's not like you put like Brad Pitt, like Brad Pitt's in it, and it's like, yeah, well, we got him for like 1.5 minutes, so we put his name in the title. I don't know. I thought that was weird. I feel like he was supposed to have more, and then they just cut him out. But that was a cool action sequence. They're all jumping over their own light trails and stuff like that. They dominated all the incom programs. Like, you know, it's like, hey, here's the classic blue, and they just got destroyed. But Dillinger was making he was literally making military programs. So it made sense that they were like just wiping all of them out. And it was like, that's actually logical for the story. And then, you know, they're so militant. That's why we get like this whole chase sequence, chase film, realistically, where it's like, all right, you got 30 minutes, chase her down. Okay, Ares is betraying them. I'm gonna bring you back in. You got 30 more minutes. Go get them. Well, technically, she brought herself back. It was like, I got 30 minutes, and then she's bringing out the recognizer and everything else, which is super cool. Brought out like the tank from the beginning of the movie as well. All of that stuff, super cool. I love the fact that Dillinger was the one making them. That's why it was a triangle instead of a circle. It's like, that's why they did that. That's why they're all red. It's Dillinger, who's the bad guy, of course. So I loved all of that. I thought all of that was super cool. And I was like, I like that that is what results in the change where even the light cycles are his version of light cycles, but they're still light cycles. The recognizers are his version of recognizers, but they're still recognizers. So it's still all the same things, but it's just like the other side of the coin because it was Dillinger doing it and he knew the programs. So I thought that was super cool. Or maybe, you know, that's just kind of like the language of coding in that universe where if you make a light cycle, it will always be a light cycle. But if someone does like a tiny little thing, it'll come out designed slightly differently. So I liked all of that stuff. I liked how the characters kind of ended up portraying themselves, and Ares being, you know, the program that's like, well, what's it like to be human? Not that that's the newest concept in general. Storytelling is not the newest concept at all. But even for Legacy, having done that, it was like, yeah, that's not really the craziest thing in the world. Like that was Clue's whole thing. Like, hey, I got an army. I want to put that army out there. You know, what's it mean to be human and all that stuff, and wanting to be more and all that stuff. Not exactly new for Tron, really in general. I would say even in the, you know, first movie, it's kind of like, oh, programs can feel. That's kind of just the base level concept. It's not really like Ghost in the Shell where it's like, what does it mean to be human? They don't ever really touch on that. Like, once again, that goes into that realm of stuff where it's like, they kind of don't touch on that in Tron at all. It's just kind of like, this is what you do. You're a program. You can feel and do all these things. We're humans. Holy crap, you can feel like that. That's interesting. And that's just how it is normally. And this was like the first time they had a program that's we see kind of learning it. I feel like in Tron, especially like even in Tron Legacy, I feel like everyone knew what users were and they were just like, yeah, users. Okay. They kind of didn't believe them. They were considered like kind of religious nuts and stuff like that if you believed in users. Even in the first movie, it was like that. But people believed in them, that they were made by actual human beings. So they're just like, even when they find out, it's just kind of like, oh, okay. In the first movie, they were shocked. And I think in Legacy, it was just kind of like, oh, a user's here. That's crazy. But yeah, we know users exist. And so it's just kind of normal for them. But this is technically like a whole new program system because it was all Dillinger. So it was interesting. You know, it wasn't like crazy, but it was like, okay, Ares wants to understand, like, I'm expendable. What does that mean? And he heard rain and stuff like that. It's a feeling, and, you know, those sorts of things. So it was not new in any way, shape, or form as far as the concept we've seen as human beings, but it was technically kind of new for Tron to really touch on that as an important, you know, factor of the story. Because normally it's just like the first movie is, I got to get the F out of here. I'm human. I don't want to die. The second movie, I'm human. I don't want to die. And then this one was finally like, I'm a program. I want to be human. That's kind of the actual main focus. So it was a change, but not like a change that was the craziest thing in the world or anything new in storytelling, but it was a difference. So it was a bit interesting watching him kind of go through that process and betraying his owner and then taking off and having, you know, 30 minutes, getting to meet Flynn. Loved everything they did with the classic grid. I'd seen, I wish I didn't see it, but of course, you know, promotions and all that stuff. I thought it was just a random commercial, and then I was like, oh no, this is in the movie. And then actually seeing it, I loved it. They got bit, which I thought was super cool. So that was awesome. I wish we saw like the old school recognizers. So we of course got the old school light cycle. That was very cool. And of course you get to see Flynn come back again. They didn't do the de-aging. It was just like, he's just old. Don't question it. He just is. We're not going to bother with it. He just is. And so it was like, I don't care. It's cool. As I've heard, he was more like the dude than he was like Flynn, which is also pretty cool. So that's not an issue. But I like that sequence. Just being able to actually see the grid was definitely, you know, old school OG grid was definitely amazing. This is a good time to randomly reference. There is a game where you can play light cycles. It's called Armageddon Advanced. It is free and you can play it online. And it's great. It's existed forever. I remember playing that junk in high school, and we would do like little LAN parties in computer class, and just be like, "Yeah, I want to play like Tron." And that was a big thing that I randomly found out about. It's a free game. Download it. Armageddon Advanced. I'm gonna have to put that in the comments because I know most of you aren't here. Watch more of my videos, please. But all in all, I enjoyed the movie. I think it was really fun. I like the action. I like the characters. I think the characters are fine. I shouldn't say I like the characters. I like the movie. I'm not concerned with being like invested in the characters. I know that might sound crazy as far as the enjoyment of a film, but I thought all the characters were fine. You know, like you have Ares, and then he's like the main character, but then you have like our secondary character, who is name I can't remember. Horrible with names. If Ares' name wasn't Greek, because I could connect that to God of War, I wouldn't remember anyway. And Dillinger, they say like 800 times, and you hear Dillinger throughout the entire franchise more than you do. If it's not Flynn, Dillinger has to be like the second most used name in all of Tron. Like, honestly, if you really think about it. But the other main character, she was interesting, had a sad story with, her dead sister and them trying to work together to find the permanence code and stuff like that, and trying to be altruistic and stuff. And that's nice. It's definitely a movie. Definitely a movie, because she wanted to be good. That's movie writing right there. She wanted to be a good human being. That's fake. But I like the idea. I love the idea, in fact. And I thought it was cool. I like the fact, I like the scene when she's running down the street and they trap her with like the weird, like the little mini pod drones, and then they just circle around her. I was like, oh, that's actually super cool. I really like that sequence where they trapped her in that way. But she was fine. Like I said, it was just okay, and learning about her and what she wants to do and figure out like her purpose in life, because her sister was the one that really led into the whole income thing, and she was kind of just like there doing some other stuff as well. And I like what they did with it. Once again, very simple, but I enjoyed it. Also really love the scene where they recreate Flynn's old office. Of course, I'm gonna love that. Have other references to the 80s. Even Ares is like, I like the 80s and I like Depeche Mode. Very random. Definitely like the most random thing where I'm like, okay, they wrote that in there. That's fine. That's fine. I can't say I liked it, but it was fine. I was like, all right. The only thing that could have made it more of a random 80s reference is he was like, I always wanted to see The Breakfast Club. I was like, sure you did. Okay. Which he technically would have been able to do. I don't know. But he just says, I like the 80s, and they reference Depeche Mode. Maybe they just couldn't get the money to pay for all the other references. Cause I'm like, he says he loved the 80s, but he only says Depeche Mode. And no offense to Depeche Mode, but I'm like, I think of like a billion other things of the 80s before I ever think of Depeche Mode, personally speaking. But aside from that, still really enjoyed the movie. Love the visuals, of course. Can't wait to see if we get another one. That mid-credit sequence where Dillinger putting himself in the computer was also insane. I love that sequence where he was like, I don't want to go to jail, and he puts himself in the computer. Absolutely love that. And then we actually get a post-credit sequence where he's just trapped in what's already like a defunct, system. And then I thought, at first, of course, like you see the data disk, and I thought it was going to be his. And the first thing I thought was, well, why is it a circle? Because that doesn't make any sense. And then I realized it wasn't like a weird angle. It was like, no, that actually just looks gray and red. And I'm like, that looks like an old data disk. That doesn't make any sense. And then of course he touches it, and then he gets corrupted and starts being taken over by the original master control program, which was also a cool thing when Dillinger calls Ares the he calls it, master control. I was like, oh, that's cool. That, just that being a thing from the first movie, of course. But that post-credit sequence, as someone who really likes Tron and enjoyed this movie as well as the last two movies, I'm like, man, I've never wanted to have another Tron movie more than this one. Because as much as I would have loved to have seen a continuation from, of course, Tron Legacy, and be like, well, what does happen after they escape and you have a character that gets to see the real world? What happens there? Now we have, if we get a fourth movie, Master Control coming back from the original film. Who knows how it will sound, because that was actually a really important factor for me as far as that character being evil and just that voice. So we'll see about that in general if we even get this film. But we have that. And then, of course, the reference of Ares looking for Sam and Cora. I remember both their names, though. But him looking for both of them, it's like, okay, they actually showed up in some pictures at the very end. And he even had coordinates on the random picture of her where it was like Olivia Wilde like up close on the camera. I was like, okay, they're like really teasing this. So I hope it happens for sure, because they're going to try to get him back. And then also have master control from the first film. And so the fourth movie can combine 1 and 2 together, more succinctly even, also with the third movie. And if we ended on the fourth one where it's like all the things combined, you have Ares from 3, you have Sam and Cora from the first one, and then our main villain from the first film, that would be great. They could also get, I can't remember the actor's name. I want to say Cillian Murphy. If they could get him back, that would be cool, because he was also a Dillinger, but he was a good guy. He worked for Incom, and that was another thing they don't really reference, because it's like, oh, it's been like 16 years and Sam's just gone. They don't even reference Dillinger from the last movie. They didn't even, like, unless I missed it, they didn't even make something up for him to be like, yeah, and he's still with Incom or anything or whatever. They just kind of ignored that. But I'd like to see an element of that as well, where it's like, I kind of wish they at least wrote something off where it was just like, yeah, and he kind of just left the business or whatever. And then that's why he's not in this, because they have Evan Peters as the current Dillinger, and then his mom. But it's like, there's a dude that's like right in there that was in the last movie, but he worked for Incom, and so he wasn't like an a-hole. But I also thought he was the grandson as well. So unless he's like the big brother or something, I'd have to actually go back and look at that, because that's something they definitely just kind of left out, where it was like, we won't even reference it. That was a mistake. They could, like I said, just write a BS line or something. And that, I was like, I wish they at least referenced that in some way, shape, or form. But there's like no mention of him. And I was like, that's probably like the one thing that actually bothered me in the whole movie, because they didn't even do like the Sam thing. Like, and he left. It was like, they didn't even do that for the last Dillinger that we got. So that one's a little weird. That's like the only thing where I'm like, even as a BS line, they didn't even bother with that part. So that's the only thing that I wish we had from this one, aside from, you know, more hand-to-hand combat, because I think that was super cool. But all in all, I enjoyed the movie. Like I said, I still feel like the odd man out. We'll see what happens. It's Tron in general. It, you know, probably would be another 16 years. It'll probably take somebody else with a bunch of money or a bunch of popularity to be like, what if we did Tron again, for it to ever happen? But I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get a fourth one. And even if it's like the last one, that'll be great. They could just wrap it all up, throw Elijah Wood in there as a random reference. I'd lose my mind. But that's all I would need. Like, if we can just get one more movie, and then they can just wrap it up as far as like a thing, and then we should be good. Or they can just do like a bunch of little side stories or whatever, who knows. But if they did like one more movie and just actually did everything together, I think I'd be happy. You know, I would. Who knows about everybody else, but I'd be pretty happy. So those are my thoughts on Tron Ares. I enjoyed it. I hope we get another one, and we'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening. But I would love to know your thoughts on all things Tron Legacy. If you've seen it, please let me know what you thought of Tron Uprising. Of course, this film itself, Tron Ares, what you guys are thinking about the end of the movie, as far as him like looking for Sam and Cora, the post-credit sequence, the MCP coming back. We'll love to know your thoughts on all things Tron. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.